J. Posadas was born Homero Romulo Frasnelli Cristalli in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Yeah, that's a lot of names.
A lot of flourish.
It was on the summer day of January 20th, 1912. It's important to note that this was a summer day for two reasons. One, because the southern hemispheric summer attracted millions of immigrants from Europe to work year-round, making Argentina's population about half foreign-born by the 20th century. And because 7-year-old Posadas' earliest memories were watching a near revolution on the hot streets of Buenos Aires in January of 1919. The Cristalli parents were shoemakers from the south of Italy. When they arrived in Buenos Aires, they joined the Federación Obrera Regional de Argentina, the FORA, an explicitly revolutionary, anarchist communist union that between 1900 and 1910 was the center of the workers' movement. The culmination of their efforts to establish Argentina not as a capitalist nation-state, but as a communist region run by workers' councils was extinguished before the young Homero Cristalli's eyes when gendarmes fired on the crowd and patriotic mobs attacked Jewish and Catalan areas in the city in a counter-revolutionary wave today known as the Semana Trágica, the Tragic Week. Despite the defeat, Cristalli lived the rest of his life believing that the workers would one day triumph, and the revolutionary wave that began in Russia in 1917 would spread worldwide. He spent his youth singing protest songs in a local choir, or solo in the popular tango style, for cookies and croissants.
We made songs, mostly attacks, complaints, protests, mostly about the trash, because the trash was never taken out and the people loved it.
Yeah, real down-to-earth issue, a real local kind of problem.
That's right, the trash is not getting fucking taken out by these corrupt bastards.
Why are the politicians not talking about the trash?
Imagine QAnon trying to settle for something that pedestrian and normal. To be like, fill in the potholes or, whatever, like fund our schools better.
They did do that.
Forget it.
Remember when there was that like right-wing dude who went around just like cleaning up trash in like Chicago and shit, and he was like, I'm cleaning up Chicago's trash because they won't do it.
Right, these filthy liberal cities. He dropped out of school after 2 years to pursue a career in professional soccer. Eventually, he became a backup midfielder for Estudiantes La Plata in 1928, one of the great teams in the rapidly professionalizing sport.
Tight.
In 1930, a strike led by anarchist soccer players led to the formalization of the league. So anarchists are making the leagues formal in 1930s soccer Argentina.
Are creating structure to the league. Yes.
Homero did not make the cut and was forced to return to his old neighborhood, a celebrity, although a poor one. He took up a job as a metal worker until he lost 2 fingers on a mechanical lathe. He then made ends meet doing odd jobs and distributing the youth section of the Socialist Party's newspaper. Eventually, Cristalli worked his way up and became the secretary of his local chapter. One of the initiatives of the socialist youth at the time was supporting the Republican side of the Spanish Civil War, which included liberals, communists, and anarchists against the anti-democratic forces of General Franco, with support from the fascists and Hitler. According to a song he wrote on the subject, he was summoned to Buenos Aires Café to meet with a group then calling themselves the Bolshevik Leninists, soon to be known as the Trotskyists. At the time, they were a thoroughly bourgeois bohemian group of surrealist poets, modernist artists, and Hegelian philosophers. And in Cristalli, they saw an exit to distance themselves from the working class. After proving himself loyal, they sent him to the interior of the country, Cordoba, to organize a shoemakers union. He survived for months on stolen meals from the hospital while he agitated and pamphleteered outside the union gates, eventually succeeding in organizing a massive union that went on strike in 1937. In the course of the strike, he found love, Candida Previtera. He proposed to her in a cafe.
We had 10 cents. We drank 1 coffee between us,
he said. In place of a ring, he offered her Trotsky's transitional program.
Look, this is what I struggle for. This is the objective of my life,
he told her.
I have many things to learn. We are going to be very hungry. We are going to be persecuted. They can kill us, but we must live for this. There are many things that I don't understand, that I don't know, but we are going to learn along the way. I invite you to live with me for this. This is the objective of my life.
Shortly afterwards, he wrote his first political pamphlet, Revolutionary Youth or Patriotic Youth, a criticism of the anti-fascism of the socialist youth movement on the eve of World War II. Cristalli echoed the position of Trotsky that revolutionaries could not unite with liberals to defend democracy against fascism, but should push towards proletarian revolution and dictatorship instead. We've been arguing about all this stuff for so long. To say that this was almost 100 years ago is still the same. It's like, the libs are not going to stand with us in the end. They're fucking traitors.
It's the same TV show.
And the libs being like, you motherfuckers, we'll ally with the fascists. And then war. Because everyone wants to fight it out in the end. What a great and terrifying vision.
Listen, nothing works. This is why we should just give up.
No, we should not give up. See, this is nihilism. At least become an anarchist.
All right.
A little more volition.
Yeah, but nihilism is less violent. You can, you know, you can just
No, it's not.
It's
Live
good.
in a-
It's
live in
good.
a-
You nihilism.
No.
You lie there. You just let the world roll
yeah.
over you.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. It's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
The mass murderers in our recent history have not all had like a very strong nihilistic streak, right, boys?
Yeah,
not
you-
a destructive thought system.
Yeah,
What
you
is
get
wrong
a-
with you two?
You get a cabin out
It's
in the
too
river.
hot and you guys are going nihilist?
Build
Look
build
at
yourself
Travis.
a nice.
Be ashamed of yourself. Jake, I expect this from him. But you
Just get yourself a nice upgraded hatchet. Find a little shady patch. Hack some trees
no.
down.
See,
build a
anarchism
foundation.
is not Ark Survival Evolved.
Build a foundation.
That's not the same thing.
I
Harvest
don't know. I can
Tinto
get bored
berries.
with that. Primitivo
Prim-
Akard.
Yeah. Primitivism?
Yeah, primitivism. Yeah, let's just start over. Start from scratch.
Well,
Start from
Travis
the
is like, that way, I know I'll succeed. I can craft a bow.
Not at all something that leads to people building bombs to kill everybody. Good job, boys. Really doing a great job today. I bring up one thing about communism, and you guys want to nuke the planet and start over. Jesus Christ!
Listen,
I know
I'm
it's
just
hard
saying,
to build something.
That's right.
It doesn't
Listen,
mean
it would
it's
stop
futile.
the arguments. It would stop the arguments, Julian.
It's true, but you know, I still won't believe in this futility. I believe we should always build, and it's worth it.
all right.
He sent the text to Mexico City in hopes of impressing his new political idol, Leon Trotsky. A hero of the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution and Lenin's heir apparent, Trotsky had been exiled from the Soviet Union in 1929 after running afoul of Stalin. From afar, Trotsky organized a left opposition to Stalin's policies of socialism in one country and the anti-fascist Popular Front of communists and liberals to fight fascism. In response, Stalin began to kill every suspected Trotskyist and acquaintances of Trotskyists in the country, in what today is known as the Great Purges. An estimated 700,000 to 1.2 million people died between 1936 and 1938. Trotsky foresaw this would become the pretext for a catastrophic war, in which Stalin would initially align with Hitler to divide Europe before going to war with one another. He predicted this new world war would end much like the last, with a proletarian revolution which would match the exponentially worse intensity of the war with exponentially better results. Only now, Stalin's Third International, the Communist International or Comintern, was hostile to true revolutionaries, so Trotsky would have to create a new Fourth International to lead the inevitable world revolution. The Trotskyists imagined Argentina would be the headquarters of a new Soviet Union of Latin America, and quickly identified Homero Cristalli, aka J. Posadas, as a charismatic and diligent organizer to help build their national section. He became a paid secretary in 1941, but in the subsequent months, disagreements between the small circle of a few dozen Trots in the country led to them imploding into 6 different groups. Around that time, Stalinist assassin Ramon Mercader infiltrated Trotsky's compound by seducing his secretary, killing Trotsky with an ice axe. So that's kind of cool. This murderer sent by Stalin in Argentina seduced the secretary, introduced himself into Trotsky's home, and murdered him with an ice axe.
That's some real James Bond shit.
That is
but
some
on the
real
communist
shit.
side, instead
Yeah.
of the British.
Exactly. They were fucking, dude, you could not escape Stalin. He had his tendrils everywhere.
Damn, the guy like won over the secretary, like just damn.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the confidence of sending a guy to do any kind of thing where a woman has to be impressed by the end of it, and knowing with 100% confidence that it'll work?
No. Today you cannot actually be trained in guns and know how to fuck. It's actually that was a 70s thing.
Actually, the opposite.
The assassination was one of hundreds the Stalinists delivered to Trotskyists throughout the course of the war, largely in an effort to control the socialist partisan resistance movement fomenting against the Axis powers in Europe. By drawing resources away from the Eastern Front, partisans would be key in defeating the Nazis and helped establish a ring of socialist states in Eastern Europe after the war, firmly under Stalin's control. Along with the United States' horrific nuclear triumph in Japan, Trotsky's optimistic prediction turned out to be false. He did, however, make a more pessimistic one.
The inability of the proletariat to take into its hands the leadership of society could actually lead, under these conditions, to the growth of a new exploiting class from the Bonapartist fascist bureaucracy. This would be, according to all indications, a regime of decline, signalizing the eclipse of civilization.
But after the war, the Fourth International reformed itself around Michel Pablo, an Egyptian-Greek man who had survived the war in the French underground resistance. He believed that Trotsky's initial prediction was dead on. He reasoned that the war had not really ended, that the peace between the Soviet Union and the United States was temporary, because capitalism was in terminal collapse, and a final nuclear showdown between imperialism and the worker states was imminent. Pablo found an enthusiastic supporter of the theory in a new organizer from Argentina no one had heard of, J. Posadas, the new nom de guerre of Homero Cristalli, and figurehead of a newly formed Grupo Cuarto Internacional, Fourth International Group, that had begun publishing a regular newspaper analyzing the post-war situation in Argentina, especially the mass movement around the third positionist leader, Juan Perón, from a Trotskyist perspective. The founders of the Fourth International Group included intellectuals who would become famous throughout the Latin American left for their writing after leaving Posadism: Adolfo Gili and Guillermo Almeida. Another founder was Dante Minazzoli, a fan of esoteric strains of communism and science fiction from the Argentine backcountry. When news of the Roswell incident and Kenneth Arnold's flying saucer sightings spread across global tabloids in 1947, Minazzoli brought the subject up at a cadre meeting, arguing that these were spaceships that arrived in the nuclear age to deliver humanity to cosmic consciousness.
God damn it.
I love woo communists. I don't know, it's just so different from what we usually explore, right?
Yeah.
With their immediate tasks, building a party within the Peronist movement and earning recognition from the Fourth International, however, Minazzoli was then prohibited from discussing the flying saucers phenomenon. Shh, dude, shut the please, man. We're trying to... Come on,
This
man.
has been happening...
Trying to bread pill people. You're ruining it.
This has been happening for centuries, where a movement essentially is very concerned that they're about to get hijacked by fucking UFO and alien believers and shit.
Throughout the 50s, Posadas developed a strong Latin American bureau of the Fourth International with sections in Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, and Mexico. Trotskyists in the Posadas organization were the ideological figureheads of a miners' revolution in Bolivia in 1952, and, earning influence with the Peronist syndicates in Argentina, fielded candidates and drafted a far-left trade union program calling for workers' control. But no event was more influential to Posadism, the Fourth International, or world socialism in general than the Cuban Revolution in 1959. A handful of Cuban Trotskyists fought alongside Castro and Guevara in Cuba, and despite repression from the Soviet-aligned Communist Party, were allowed to form a new party with influential membership in unions and even in Che Guevara's Ministry of Industry. When the Trotskyists met in 1960 to determine their new leadership, the Posadas pointed to their influence in the Cuban and Algerian revolutions, the strength of their section overall, and the rise of revolution in the Third World as evidence that control of the Fourth International should be given to Posadas. Seeing him as little more than an unintellectual paper pusher, the Trotskyists declined. Infuriated, Posadas broke his Latin American bureau away to create the Fourth International, Posadism, premised on the idea that Posadas, as an organic working-class militant, would be the most fearless leader to steer the revolutionary masses of the colonized world into and through the coming collapse of capitalism and the Third World War. They set up new national sections under their control throughout Europe, and the catastrophist sentiment spread among dozens of young recruits. Among them was David Douglas of the British section, who admired Posadas' vision.
On a world scale, the war would devastate imperialism and capitalism, but the masses as such would survive, and the knowledge of the ideology of communism would advance to cleanse the earth once again, and humanity would triumph at last.
At first, their influence increased throughout Europe, but especially in Latin America. Tides began to change in Cuba in 1961, however, when an army of mercenaries landed at Playa Girón, the Bay of Pigs, in an ultimately doomed CIA invasion plot. In response, the Posadas called for citizens of Guantanamo to raid the U.S. military base. So this is amazing. There was a point in history that, we're going to take Guantanamo. That was how, I guess, volatile world power still was. Just imagine a country or anybody trying to do anything like take Guantanamo. Just horrifying results.
I didn't know
unthinkable.
I didn't know that there were conspiracy folks other than QAnon obsessed with Guantanamo.
Yeah, it's
in a
true.
different way, sort of.
Well,
but
it's not hard. It's a fucking weird secret prison and military base. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the stuff of
It's
fables.
like, it's
that's
like
true.
Area 51, but you're sure weird shit's going down.
really
Yeah.
bad stuff's
Yeah,
going
you know,
there.
you
Yeah.
know it.
That's right. You know they're testing stuff on people. So, of course, this raid would have meant war. Matters were made worse during the Cuban Missile Crisis when Soviet cargo ships laden with nuclear missiles approached the United States blockade of Cuba. Posadas leader Adolfo Gili wrote that during the October 1962 days, when everyone was certain Havana would be nuked at any moment, revolutionary enthusiasm was at an all-time high.
There were signs saying, "To arms!" all over Havana, and members of the popular militias doing their exercises in the rain. There was no sign of alarm or terror, only a refusal to bow before the atomic threat. It was this non-acceptance, which everyone to this day remembers, that saved Cuba and the revolution, and was a real moment of glory.
Although Castro and Guevara were both sympathetic to the militarist visions of Posadas, the Soviet Union brokered a détente with Kennedy, and the Cubans had to abide. The Cuban communists were then given free rein to suppress. Nearly every prominent member of the party was rounded up for criticizing Castro. The only thing that saved them from lengthy sentences was Che Guevara, who personally visited them in prison and brokered a deal for them to dissolve the party in exchange for their freedom. Shortly afterwards, Guevara resigned his post in the Cuban government and disappeared. Although we now know he left to assist guerrilla movements in the Belgian Congo and then Bolivia, it was rumored Guevara had gone crazy, become a Trotskyist, or both, and that Castro had sent him to an asylum. Posadas took the rumor up a notch in his press, reporting that Castro had had Guevara killed under pressure from the Soviets. So much conspiracy theorizing.
He's just a pilled guy, or it's like he does the QAnon thing where he takes something that's like kind of true and just amps it up as much as possible.
Exactly.
Hell yeah, the truth is boring, Travis, don't you know?
That's right. It is boring.
It's more interesting this way.
Mm-hmm. The CIA-backed military dictatorship that was quickly turning into a genocide, along with Posadas' influence over the Guatemalan guerrilla forces, led Castro to denounce Posadas publicly at the 1966 Tricontinental Congress of Anti-Imperialist States.
It is not by coincidence that this gentleman, a leader of the Fourth International, mentions here very heartily the case of Guatemala and of the 13th November movement, because precisely in relation to this movement, Yankee imperialism has used one of the most subtle tactics to liquidate a revolutionary movement, which consisted of infiltrating the agents of the Fourth International who, by ignorance, political ignorance, made the main political leader of that movement adopt no less than that discredited thing, that anti-historic thing, that fraudulent thing which emanated from elements who without doubt serve imperialism, as did the program of the Fourth International.
So they're basically being like, they've been infiltrated, you can't trust Posadas anymore. Posadas, of course, was the, quote, main political leader of Trotskyism, and his marginal position was not exactly helped by Castro's denunciation. Caught between the near messianic authoritarianism of Posadas, the failure of his strategies in Central America, and mounting state repression that led to dozens of executions and long prison sentences in Mexico, Guatemala, Brazil, and Argentina, young Posadas from around the world began to criticize Posadas, still agreeing with the thrust of his politics, but arguing that the monolithic top-down party structure was isolating militants from their social context. Each time they did, Posadas responded with hasty expulsions, denouncing the criticisms as the work of imperialist agents. The movement continued to shrink through 1968. Around that time, there was a global wave of riots, strikes, and uprisings, unseen in scope until the present day. It was perhaps the moment the Trotskyists were waiting for, an explicitly internationalist and anti-capitalist global movement connecting youth and workers in the struggle against both imperialism and the bureaucracy of the Soviet Union. But the Posadas, like most other Trotskyist groups, were too fractured, small, and ideologically closed-minded to meet the challenges of the moment. For example, Posadas denounced the students in Paris.
They don't shave or bathe. They repel everyone. It's a bohemian phenomenon, a combination of the fashion of protesting against capitalism as a way of escaping capitalism. It indicates the influence of the proletariat, but with an individualistic sentiment.
Yeah. Another publication in 1968 that indicated their alienation from the real movement was the essay Flying Saucers, The Process of Matter and Energy, Science, the Revolutionary and Working Class Struggle, and the Socialist Future of Mankind. In it, Posadas declared that UFOs were real, that they were piloted by aliens who are far more advanced than us, and they overcame or avoided the capitalist stage of development altogether. And as such, we should make contact with them if possible.
Here, we barely know how to make best use of the oil and, in a very limited fashion, nuclear energy that we have at hand. They, on the contrary, may be on the way to exploiting all the energy existing in matter. This energy must contain a property and force infinitely superior to anything we know. We can conceive of a being which, just by raising its hand, can produce light, draw energy to it, push it away, and organize it. It is possible. We are habituated to seeing and conceiving of life on Earth in the commercial sense of private property, the feeling of possession, which is the basis of social development before the coming of the worker state. It is this that determines the purpose of life and its relation with other planets. When they plan a journey to another planet, they do so in order to see how to exploit and dominate it, because science is subjected to those who pay for it.
I mean, there's parts of this that are so true, especially now in the age of like Elon Musk and the privatization of NASA. If we knew that the long-term winner of the space race would hand it all over to a fucking emerald heir from South Africa who wanted to fly a car around in space. I mean, that's the dumbest potential outcome. Maybe even dumber than thinking the dolphins are going to be your fucking friends in the long run.
All the news of UFOs around the various parts of the world coincide. There are many coincidences, not all of which are exaggerations. We believe and accept that these beings exist. The majority of people who have seen them say that they are normal beings, and the people who speak of them say that they do not believe in ghosts or spirits. Many people have already seen UFOs. General MacArthur, that Yankee murderer, said with regard to the disappearance of a plane that had struck a strange object, quote, "Perhaps we, together with the Soviets, will have to make war against an enemy arriving from outside Earth." End quote. But conciliation of this type has its limits. Capitalism has no interest in UFOs, and, as such, makes no research into them.
I mean, this is kind of an interesting and funny point about capitalism back then, is that they were UFO pilled too, but they were all like, we're going to fucking nuke these motherfuckers. They're coming to kill us for sure.
Right.
They really couldn't imagine a good encounter with aliens. All the movies are about, it's enslavement and domination.
That's
so
good.
This is kind of a nice utopian take on that, if he wasn't also doing all the bad stuff.
Not only are the aliens super advanced technologically, they're also commies in my particular strain as well.
Well,
All the people
let's
I've
just say they
talked
could
to.
imagine cooperation. That's
Okay.
that's what he's imagining, is the imagination of cooperation, which is not what the Strangelove vision was, nor what the general military vision of the Americans was.
Capitalism has no interest in UFOs, and, as such, makes no research into them. It has no interest in occupying itself with these matters because they cannot reap profits, nor are they useful to capitalism. But people see in UFOs the possibility of advancement and progress. This thus accelerates the fall of the bourgeoisie, shown in all its uselessness. Capitalism feels that it has been made to look inferior, faced with a system that it sees as superior.
So capitalism won't face the ETs because they're better.
They're better.
They know it's a better system to be an extraterrestrial than being a capitalist. So I like this because I like the idea that extraterrestrials, if you advance to a far enough stage of your evolution, you actually know how to get along and not destroy the planet. It's a utopian vision, unproven in any way.
I suppose so.
But it's pretty fucking adorable.
It's different than sort of the, I suppose, the colonialist vision
Right.
of aliens who go from planet to planet sucking up all the resources, you know?
Right.
Which is most alien movies.
Yeah.
But then, like, TNG is a weird kind of communist society, essentially. So it's like, utopianism is a fascinating thing. I wish we still had it. I miss it.
He continues, people will draw the conclusion that capitalism is useless. They say, look at that! And you, what are you any good for? The ruling class feels diminished. If it could draw a military gain from doing so, it would conduct research. But capitalism tries, on the contrary, to spread the impression that this is fantasy, so people will not think that there are superior forms of relations and that capitalism is incapable of reaching this level. The workers' state will act in a different way because it has an objective interest in developing socialism.
In reality, Posadas took the position to settle a dispute within the intellectual core and their 1967 World Congress in Montevideo, Uruguay, where the Posadas International was headquartered. The UFO enthusiast Dante Minazzoli, now leader of the European Bureau, began pushing his extraterrestrial hypothesis anew as an important subject for the International to take up. He believed that the world proletariat hungered for contact with aliens, and that the aliens were more likely to visit us and save us from capitalism if we were welcoming to them. Guillermo Almeida thought this was insanity, and demanded Minazzoli stop wasting time bringing it up. Posadas split the difference, saying that Minazzoli's speculations about UFOs were correct, but that we already had everything we need on Earth to create socialism, and so no need to waste time waiting for the aliens to come. Nonetheless, the essay went viral around Trotskyist circles, desperate to delegitimize Posadas as a madman to validate their own choice of sects, making him famous to this day as the communist UFO guy. The second important event for Posadas in 1968 was the raid on one of the conferences in Montevideo. Posadas, along with his wife and secretary, were exiled to Italy, where the movement was much younger and more ideologically attached to Posadism than Trotskyism, Leninism, or even Marxism. He brought his intellectual core along with him, solicited donations from European communist artists and students sympathetic with the repression of their Latin American comrades, and built a compound in the hills outside of Rome.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Paranoid
Never
with a
good when
compound.
the compound arrives.
It's-
It's almost never good.
Never good.
It's gonna happen. I mean, QAnon's headed for a compound
Oh,
eventually.
yeah.
I had a journalist ask me that, and I said yes. It's almost inevitable. It's a numbers game. It's just a question of when.
Yeah,
I mean,
like who's gonna organize this compound?
who's going to be the first compound
Yeah.
that kind of fuses QAnon with SovCit
I
and
mean, this is all
militia stuff.
It's like it's so predictable. It's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that. I mean, it's basically you're saying the soups that have been spilled near each other will mix.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's just kind of logic. I mean, this is physics, ladies and gents. This is the scientific scientific method. The Posadas International working class base had already disintegrated almost entirely since Castro's denunciation in the mid-60s and the arrival of the anti-communist Condor dictatorships in Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina. Those remaining would have to go entirely underground. The most murderous of these dictatorships was an Argentine anti-communist alliance formed within Perón's security detail, led by López Rega, nicknamed El Brujo, the Warlock. Rega was a member of an international neo-fascist network based out of the Propaganda Due Lodge in Rome, and he was able to convince Perón in their conspiratorial, synarchistic worldview that all the various sects of communism were aligned together with the international Jewish bankers to destroy great nations like Argentina.
Tried to pell him.
Fuck. Although the left in Argentina broadly supported Perón, one guerrilla network continued to attack the imperialist and fascist elements of the Peronist right, mainly the military and large international corporations, leading Perón to believe the left needed to be crushed. In 1973, he authorized the formation of the Argentine Anti-Communist Alliance, the AAA, which had a kill list that included Homero Cristalli, that's Jay Posadas, and his associates. He even publicly blamed Posadas for a guerrilla raid on a military base, which led to a flurry of headlines throughout the region asking, "Who is Posadas?" with perhaps the first Posadist meme portraying him as a boogeyman. Perón died soon after, and the AAA made its way to power. Several Posadist militants were among the tens of thousands they disappeared, among them Posadas' son-in-law, Santi, a leader of the organization's Brazilian section. This led to a particularly grim chapter for the movement. In the 70s, Posadas gave up his ambition of being the leader of the vanguard party of world revolution. He instructed his militants to give up their independence and join the communist parties and leftist united fronts around the world, believing their role was to spread Posadist ideas among those with more power. He hoped political and military leaders of the Soviet Union, China, and Yugoslavia would read his work and fall under the influence of his unique and esoteric views on what sort of life would be lived under communism. He hoped to demonstrate the pure harmonious joy of life under communism, starting in his own compound. Thus, like so many political movements in the 70s, Posadism became essentially an experiment in New Age communal living. At this point, already tight party discipline and moral restrictions became imperative. Non-procreative sex and sex in general was banned outside of wedlock. Married couples would be separated from each other for long periods of time to make sure their libidinal energies were channeled into the movement.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow, trad commies.
Fully going, yeah.
Damn libidinal energy?
No fap commies. Yeah, you can only fuck the dolphins now. Militants who faltered in some way, like showing any signs of individualism, would be punished with more movement work. Militants who did well were also rewarded with more work. Everyone was forced to listen to Posadas' hours-long speeches.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
This is sounding like Ramtha's School of Enlightenment, where she
fucking
just
rules.
gets a bunch of people to listen to her rant on stage for hours.
That's right. He's just like wine drunk with like 2 bars of Xanax in him. What was I saying again? Everyone was forced to listen to Posadas' hours-long speeches and submit to his psychoanalytic one-on-one sessions, and those who considered leaving the movement or fell out of favor were subjected to brutal self-crit sessions designed to make them fall back into line. The more control Posadas claimed, the more paranoid he became of his inner circle, who were all superior thinkers to him on the history of revolutionary socialism and Marxist theory. Between 74 and 76, he began expelling them one by one, many under accusations that they were sleeping with his wife behind his back. See, that's what I like about a communist. He's like, yeah, you know what? I don't actually care if people sleep with my wife, but if I can use it as a tool, why not? You know, he's not embarrassed because he's like, well, everyone should be shared. But
You slept with my wife,
but yeah,
haven't
you slept with my wife. This is not a humiliation to me. It means that you're bad at sharing.
You've slept with my wife.
How dare you be so selfish?
You've also slept with my wife.
All you capitalist fucks are really dicking down my wife. You motherfuckers. I'm going to expel you from this movement, you imperialist scum. Stop drilling my wife.
Oh, great Posadas. What happened to your most loyal inner circle? Well, my son, all 12 of them slept with my wife on different
Your
occasions.
mother. After expelling them, he expelled his wife. And then he... What a move. What a move. You fucked my wife. You're all leaving. Also, you wife, get the fuck out of here. But, dude, he follows this. The best part is that he follows this by then expelling a young man and taking on his young girlfriend as his new partner. So Damn. Everyone who fucked my wife and the boyfriend of my new girlfriend, get the fuck out of
What
here.
a huge fucking Playboy move, dude.
Oh,
He got
yeah.
rid of all his competition and his wife in one fucking swoop. Immediately kicked out the guy, the girl who he had a crush on. Just gone.
Oh, fuck.
Dude, all these guys eventually get to a point
So
where they just
bad.
get boiled down to their most, like, what they want the most, which is just be like, away with you, and like, give me the younger.
Soon, the younger girlfriend was pregnant. In 1976, their daughter was declared the heir apparent of the movement, with much of their activity focused on the education of what they were calling a star child.
Oh,
So,
God damn it.
cosmic
Fantastic.
child, baby.
Little Posadas savior, Messiah.
A little bit of the Order of the Solar Temple, too, mixed in here. Like, towards the end of his cult shit, it was all like, growth of the child, who's fucking who, I get jealous of this person, let's make them all kill each other.
This is
Not great.
this is how it all ends.
It
Just
ended very
compounds
badly.
and fuckfests and star children.
We're humans, after all. Free from the constraints of Travis View and other intellectuals in his circle who were making fun of him all the time and debunking his bullshit, Posadas spent the last years of his life educating his infant daughter and young following in world history, music, art, and esoteric theories. Among these was a new theory about how communism, which he insisted was still coming very soon, once nuclear World War III had wiped out much of the world's population, and that would leave only the communist worker states and Posadas as their main influence. This would achieve, quote, unity with nature and the cosmos. The symbol of this cosmic unity was the dolphin, an animal Posadas became fascinated by in the last years of his life after reading the work of Russian midwife Igor Tchaikovsky. A pioneer of water birth, Tchaikovsky believed that dolphins and humans had a common origin and a psychic bond, and children born underwater or in space, with the help of a dolphin, would have superhuman abilities and be impenetrable to nuclear radiation. Wait, so you're born in water with a dolphin and you're immune to radiation?
The mother and the midwife give birth in the water. They are both in a pool. The child who has just been born remains 3 minutes in the water. He comes out in very good condition, the mother too, and the baby smiles. These scientists give the example of the baby born perfectly swimming at 7 months. The baby naturally tends to shake hands, not to drown, and is much better able to withstand air shortage than adults because his respiratory system was organized in water. We should have been doing this for a long time. Capitalism has no interest.
Capitalism doesn't want me to put my young bride into water with dolphins. They don't like my star child.
Put the bride in the water with the dolphins and the baby in.
Shortly after May Day in 1981, Posadas had his second and last heart attack. He was rushed to a Communist Party hospital in Rome, where he slipped into a coma and was declared brain dead. He then astounded his gathered morning militants by coming out of it and ranting for a week straight on the new tasks of the party, including rebuilding the Latin American section and constructing a pool at their compound so dolphins could eat alongside the militants like part of the family.
Okay, I like this guy now.
Came back from the dead. Came back from the dead with one last thing.
Hey!
People around you waiting for you to breathe your last breath so they can fight for power, and they're like, wait, I'm not fucking done.
One more week of me ranting about the dolphins, motherfuckers. He died again by the end of the month. Since that fateful day of his second death, the Posadas International has been carried on only by the few European militants surrounding him since the expulsions. Their small cadre, advanced in age, have been seen marching in Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, and England, but appear disinterested in recruiting for a new generation. The name of Posadas could have faded away forever with them, but miraculously, it has risen again.